The iron shackles bit into her wrists as January wind tore through the thin fabric of her dress, and Josephine James wondered if this was how her story would end, sold like livestock in a California mining town, while snow dusted the wooden platform beneath her bare feet. The auctioneer's voice boomed across Weaverville's central square, competing with the howling wind that swept down from the Trinity Mountains. Men clustered in groups, their breath forming white clouds as they eyed the merchandise being offered. Josephine kept her gaze fixed on the distant peaks, refusing to meet their stares. She would not give them the satisfaction of seeing her fear, though her heart hammered against her ribs and her legs trembled from cold and exhaustion. "Fine specimen here, gentlemen, strong, healthy, and young enough to give you years of service." The auctioneer grabbed her chin, forcing her face toward the crowd. She jerked away, earning a rough shake that made her stumble. "Spirited too, $20 to start the bidding." The year was 1867, and the California gold rush had transformed Weaverville from a quiet settlement into a chaotic hub of desperate men seeking fortune. The war had ended 2 years prior, but the scars it left ran deep. Josephine had traveled west with her father, seeking a fresh start after their Missouri farm burned during the conflict. But fever took him 3 months ago, leaving her with debts she could never repay. The boarding house owner had wasted no time selling her contract to the highest bidder, and now here she stood, 22 years old and facing an uncertain fate worse than death. 25, called a grizzled miner with tobacco-stained teeth. 30, shouted another, laughing as he elbowed his companion. Josephine closed her eyes, praying for strength. The snow fell harder now, clinging to her dark hair and melting against her pale skin. She had stopped feeling her toes an hour ago. If someone bought her contract, she would become little more than a slave, bound to work off impossible debt, with interest that would keep her trapped forever. She had heard the stories of what happened to women in such situations. Death might be kinder. $40! The bid came from a heavy-set man near the front, his eyes glinting with something that made her stomach turn. The auctioneer grinned, sensing profit. $40! Do I hear 45? A long silence stretched across the square. The heavy-set man stepped forward, reaching for his money pouch. Josephine's breathing quickened. This was it. Her life, as she knew it, was ending. $500. The voice cut through the winter air like a blade, deep and steady. Every head turned toward the speaker. Josephine's eyes snapped open, searching for the source. He stood at the edge of the crowd, tall and broad-shouldered, his dark coat dusted with snow. A wide-brimmed hat shadowed his face, but she could see the strong line of his jaw and the intensity of his gaze fixed directly on her. Unlike the other men who had been shouting and jeering, he stood perfectly still, radiating a quiet authority that silenced the square. The auctioneer's jaw dropped. "Did you say 500, sir?" "I did." The man moved forward, and the crowd parted for him. As he climbed the steps to the platform, Josephine finally got a clear look at him. He was younger than she expected, perhaps 28 or 30, with weathered features that spoke of years spent outdoors. Dark hair curled slightly beneath his hat, and his eyes were a striking shade of blue-gray that reminded her of storm clouds. He wore simple clothes, a cattleman's attire, but everything about his bearing suggested competence and strength. "That is considerably more than necessary, mister." The auctioneer trailed off, clearly unsure how to handle this unexpected turn. "Vaughn, Benjamin Vaughn." He pulled a leather wallet from his coat and counted out bills with practiced ease. "And I know what I am offering. Do you accept, or shall I take my business elsewhere?" The auctioneer snatched the money before Benjamin could change his mind. "Sold! The woman's contract belongs to Mr. Vaughn." Benjamin turned to Josephine for the first time since mounting the platform. Up close, she could see the fine lines around his eyes, the small scar above his left eyebrow, and something in his expression she had not expected. Gentleness. He removed his coat and draped it over her shoulders before she could protest. The warmth was immediate and overwhelming. She fought the urge to cry. "Can you walk?" His voice was softer now, meant only for her. She nodded, not trusting her voice. He took her elbow, steadying her as they descended the steps. The crowd watched in confused silence as Benjamin guided her away from the square, his hand gentle but firm on her arm. She expected him to lead her to some building, to claim his purchase, but instead He walked toward the livery stable at the end of the street. "Where are we going?" Her voice came out as barely a whisper. "Somewhere warm, then we need to talk." The stable was blessedly heated, with a pot-bellied stove glowing in the corner of the tack room. Benjamin settled Josephine on a bench near the heat and disappeared for a moment, returning with a blanket and a tin cup of coffee. She wrapped her shaking hands around the cup, inhaling the steam. "Drink slowly," he advised, crouching before her so they were at eye level. "You are half frozen." Josephine took a small sip, letting the bitter warmth spread through her chest. Now that the immediate danger had passed, confusion rushed in to fill the void. This man had just spent an enormous sum of money on her contract. $500 could buy land, cattle, or a business. Why would he waste it on a stranger? Why? The question escaped before she could stop it. Benjamin settled back on his heels, studying her face. "Why did I buy your contract?" She nodded. He was quiet for a moment, his gaze distant. 3 years ago, I came back from the war to find my sister in a similar situation. Our parents died while I was gone, and a man in town claimed she owed money for their care. By the time I got home, it was too late. She had been sold to a logging camp up north. His voice went flat. "I never found her." Josephine's throat tightened. "I am sorry. When I saw you standing there in the snow, looking like you would rather die than surrender, I saw Sarah. I saw another young woman losing everything because vultures prey on the vulnerable." He met her eyes again. "I could not stand by and watch it happen again. But $500 is just money. I have a ranch about 15 miles south of here. The cattle business has been good to me. I can afford the loss." She shook her head slowly, trying to understand. "What do you want from me?" Benjamin stood, moving to lean against the stable wall. "Nothing. Once you are warm enough to travel, I will take you to the ranch. You can rest there for a few days, get your strength back. Then I will give you a horse, supplies, and enough money to start fresh wherever you want to go. Denver, San Francisco, back east. Your choice." Josephine stared at him, searching for deception or hidden motives, but found only honest intention in his expression. "You are going to let me go? Just like that?" "You are not a possession, miss. I bought your contract so I could tear it up. As of this moment, you are free. The rest is up to you." Tears spilled down her cheeks before she could stop them. She had not cried on the auction block, had not cried when her father died, had not let herself break under the weight of everything she had lost. But this unexpected kindness shattered the walls she had built around her heart. She covered her face with her hands, shoulders shaking with silent sobs. She heard Benjamin move, felt him crouch beside her again. He did not touch her, did not try to shush her tears, just waited quietly until the storm passed. When she finally lowered her hands, he offered her a handkerchief. "Thank you," she whispered. "I do not even know how to begin thanking you." "No, thanks are necessary." He stood again, giving her space. "Rest here a while longer. I need to gather some supplies for the journey. When you are ready, we will head to the ranch." Josephine watched him go, his silhouette disappearing through the stable door. She pulled his coat tighter around her shoulders, breathing in the scent of leather and pine. For the first time in months, a tiny seed of hope took root in her chest. An hour later, they rode south out of Weaverville. Benjamin had provided her with proper boots, wool stockings, and a thick cloak to wear over his coat. He sat astride a large roan stallion, while she rode a gentle mare he introduced as Daisy. The snow had stopped, leaving the world wrapped in white silence. The trail wound through dense forest, tall pines weighted with fresh powder. They rode in quiet companionship, the only sounds the creak of saddle leather and the soft thud of hooves on snow-packed earth. Josephine found herself stealing glances at her unlikely rescuer. He sat his horse with the easy grace of someone born to the saddle, his eyes constantly scanning their surroundings. Despite his kindness, there was something almost dangerous about him, a coiled readiness that suggested he could handle trouble if it arose. "Have you lived in California long?" she asked, needing to break the silence. "About 4 years. I came west after the war, looking for land where I could build something of my own. Found a valley with good water and grazing. It is not much yet, but it is mine." "You run cattle?" "Cattle and some horses. I have a small breeding program going, trying to develop a line suited for mountain work, strong, sure-footed animals that can handle rough terrain." He glanced at her. "What about you? How did you end up in Weaverville?" Josephine told him about Missouri, the war, losing everything. She explained about her father's dream of California gold, the fever that took him, the debts that consumed her. Benjamin listened without interruption, his expression growing darker as she described the boarding house owner who had sold her contract. "That should be illegal," he said when she finished. "It is mostly, but the law looks the other way when it comes to debt contracts, especially for women. I had no family, no one to speak for me. I became inconvenient, so they found a way to profit from my situation. The war changed things, not always for the better. There are men who see the chaos as opportunity, who prey on those left vulnerable." He shook his head. "But there are also good people trying to rebuild, to make something decent out of the ruins." "Which are you?" He smiled slightly. "I try to be the latter. Some days are more successful than others." The sun was setting by the time they reached Benjamin's ranch. The property sat in a protected valley, sheltered by hills on three sides. A sturdy log cabin dominated the clearing, smoke rising from its chimney. Nearby stood a large barn, several corrals, and a few smaller outbuildings. Cattle dotted the snow-covered pastures, their dark shapes standing out against the white landscape. A man emerged from the barn as they approached, waving and greeting. He was shorter than Benjamin, with graying hair and a weathered face that creased into a smile when he saw them. "Thought you might get snowed in at town," the man called. "I kept the fire going and made stew." His gaze shifted to Josephine, curiosity evident but polite. "Miss James, this is Daniel Walsh. He is my foreman and keeps this place running when I cannot be bothered to do it properly." Benjamin dismounted, then moved to help Josephine down. "Daniel, Miss James will be staying with us for a few days before she continues her journey." Daniel tipped his hat. "Pleasure, miss. Any friend of Benjamin is welcome here." Benjamin led Josephine toward the cabin, while Daniel took the horses. The interior was simple but comfortable, with a large main room dominated by a stone fireplace. A kitchen area occupied one corner, while stairs led to what she assumed was a sleeping loft. The furniture was handmade but well crafted, and everything was remarkably clean for a bachelor's home. "You can take the loft," Benjamin said, setting her small bundle of possessions on the stairs. "I will sleep down here. There are clean blankets in the chest at the foot of the bed, and water in the pitcher for washing. Supper will be ready soon." Josephine climbed the stairs to find a cozy loft space with a real bed, a luxury she had not enjoyed in months. She washed her face and hands, then studied her reflection in the small mirror hanging on the wall. She looked older than her 22 years, with dark circles under her eyes and hollows in her cheeks. The dress she wore was threadbare and stained, a far cry from the modest but respectable clothes she had owned before her father died. When she descended, she found Benjamin and Daniel setting out bowls of stew and thick slices of bread. They ate together at the rough-hewn table, and Josephine discovered she was ravenous. The stew was simple, hearty fare, but it tasted better than anything she remembered. Daniel proved to be a natural storyteller, regaling them with tales of stubborn cattle and close calls with mountain lions. He made no mention of how Josephine came to be at the ranch, treating her with easy courtesy that helped her relax. By the time they finished eating, some of the tension had drained from her shoulders. "I should head back to my cabin," Daniel said, standing to pull on his coat. "Early start tomorrow. We have fence repairs on the north pasture." He nodded to Josephine. "Good to meet you, miss. Sleep well." After he left, Benjamin banked the fire while Josephine cleared the dishes. They moved around each other with careful politeness, both aware of the unusual situation. Finally, Benjamin turned to her. "I know you have been through an ordeal. Take as long as you need to rest and decide what you want to do next. There is no rush. You are being too kind. I am being decent. There is a difference." He grabbed a blanket from the chest near the fireplace. "Sleep well, Miss James. Josephine. Please, call me Josephine." He smiled, and it transformed his serious face. "Benjamin, though most people call me Ben." That night, Josephine lay in the comfortable bed, staring at the rafters overhead. The mattress was soft, the blankets warm, and for the first time in months, she felt safe. But safety brought its own complications. Tomorrow, she would wake up still free, still saved, still in debt to a man who claimed he wanted nothing in return. She did not know how to navigate this strange new reality. Sleep came slowly, but when it did, she dreamed of open roads and endless possibilities. Morning arrived with the smell of coffee and frying bacon. Josephine woke disoriented, momentarily forgetting where she was. Then memory returned, and she scrambled out of bed, horrified to realize the sun was already well up. She had slept late while Benjamin worked. She rushed downstairs to find him at the stove, spatula in hand. He glanced over his shoulder, amusement dancing in his eyes. "Easy there, no need to hurry. I figured you could use the rest. I should be helping. After everything you have done, the least I can do is earn my keep while I am here." He plated eggs and bacon, setting them on the table. "Sit, eat. We can discuss chores after you have had a proper meal." They ate together, and Josephine outlined her plan. If she was going to stay even a few days, she would work for her room and board. Benjamin protested initially, but eventually agreed when he realized she would not back down. They settled on her helping with cooking, mending, and general housework, while he and Daniel handled the ranch operations. The days fell into an easy rhythm. Josephine rose early to prepare breakfast, then tackled various domestic tasks while the men worked outside. She discovered that Benjamin's cabin, while clean, had been sorely lacking a woman's touch. Clothes needed mending, supplies needed organizing, and the kitchen could use a thorough scrubbing. She threw herself into the work, grateful for the distraction. In the evenings, the three of them would share supper and conversation. Daniel was full of questions about the East, curious about places he had never been. Benjamin was quieter but engaged, asking thoughtful questions and listening intently to her answers. Josephine found herself relaxing around them, laughing at Daniel's jokes and enjoying the simple pleasure of companionship. A week passed, then two. The winter weather kept them close to the ranch, with occasional storms dumping fresh snow across the valley. Josephine knew she should start making plans to leave, but something held her back. Perhaps it was the comfort of routine, or the warmth of the cabin, or the way Benjamin's rare smiles made her heart skip unexpectedly. Whatever the reason, she found herself reluctant to face the uncertainty beyond the valley. One afternoon, while kneading bread dough at the kitchen table, she heard shouting outside. She rushed to the window to see Benjamin and Daniel driving a group of cattle toward the barn, their horses dancing nervously. One of the cows had a dark shape clinging to its haunches, a mountain lion, teeth sunk into flesh. Without thinking, Josephine grabbed Benjamin's rifle from above the door and ran outside. The cold bit through her dress, but she ignored it, raising the weapon to her shoulder. Her father had taught her to shoot back in Missouri, and muscle memory took over. She sighted carefully, waiting for a clear shot that would not hit the cow or the men. The lion shifted, and she squeezed the trigger. The shot cracked across the valley. The mountain lion jerked and fell, releasing the cow. Benjamin spun in his saddle, his expression shocked when he saw Josephine standing in the doorway, rifle still raised. Daniel whooped and rode over to check on the injured cow, while Benjamin dismounted and strode toward her. "That was incredibly dangerous," he said, reaching her side, but his tone held more awe than anger. "And an impressive shot." Josephine lowered the rifle, her hands beginning to shake now that the immediate danger had passed. "My father taught me. He said a woman alone needed to know how to protect herself." Benjamin took the rifle gently from her hands. "He was right. Thank you. That lion has been stalking our herd for weeks. You might have saved that cow's life." Daniel called over. "She will need stitching, but she should pull through." Benjamin nodded, then turned back to Josephine. "You are full of surprises." She managed a weak smile. "I am just glad I did not miss and hit something important." That evening, as they worked together to treat the injured cow, Josephine caught Benjamin watching her with an expression she could not quite read. Something had shifted between them. Some invisible line had been crossed. She felt it in the way his hand lingered when he helped her down from the fence rail, in the intensity of his gaze across the dinner table. Later, as she lay in bed, she forced herself to confront the truth she had been avoiding. She was falling in love with Benjamin Vaughn. The realization terrified her. He had saved her life and given her freedom, expecting nothing in return. She could not complicate his generous gift with messy feelings and impossible hopes. Besides, what could a penniless woman with nothing to her name offer a man like him? She resolved to tell him in the morning that she was ready to leave. It was time to move on before she made a fool of herself. But morning brought a blizzard that raged for 3 days straight, trapping them all inside. The world beyond the cabin windows disappeared into a wall of white, and the temperature plummeted. They kept the fire roaring and took turns checking on the animals, venturing out only when necessary and then never alone. The forced proximity changed things. Josephine and Benjamin spent long hours talking, sharing stories of their pasts, their dreams, their fears. She learned that he wanted to expand the ranch, to build something that would last beyond his lifetime. He dreamed of a home filled with family, of children running through the valley, of leaving a legacy that mattered. She told him about her mother, who died when she was young, about learning to manage a household at 12, about books she loved and songs she remembered from before the war. They discovered shared tastes in literature, debated the merits of different poets, and found themselves laughing over silly things that would have meant nothing to anyone else. Daniel, wise man that he was, found excuses to disappear to his own cabin despite the storm, leaving them alone more often than not. On the third night, as the wind howled outside and the fire crackled in the hearth, Benjamin finally voiced what had been building between them. "Josephine, I need to tell you something." She looked up from the sock she was darning, her heart hammering. "What is it?" He stood near the fireplace, his face illuminated by the flickering light. "When I brought you here, I meant what I said about setting you free. I bought your contract with no expectations, no hidden agenda. I wanted you to have choices. I know that. But something has changed, or maybe it was there from the start, I do not know. What I do know is that every day you spend here makes it harder to imagine you leaving. Every smile, every laugh, every moment I spend with you, I find myself wanting more." He turned to face her fully. "I have feelings for you, Josephine. Deep feelings that I never expected to develop so quickly." Her hands stilled on the darning. "Benjamin, I know this is complicated. I know you might feel obligated because of what I did. And that is the last thing I want. But I cannot let you leave without being honest about how I feel. You have brought something to this place, to my life, that I did not even know was missing. You are strong and kind and brave, and I find myself thinking about a future that includes you in it." Josephine set aside the darning and stood, moving closer to him. "Do you think I have stayed this long just because of a blizzard? I have been looking for reasons not to leave since the first week. I told myself I was just being practical, that it made sense to wait for better weather. But the truth is, I did not want to go." Hope flared in his eyes. "Why not?" "Because somewhere between the auction block and this cabin, I fell in love with you, with your kindness and your strength, with the way you talk about your dreams, with how you saved me and expected nothing in return. I have been terrified to admit it, because I have nothing to offer you. No dowry or status or even a decent dress to my name." Benjamin closed the distance between them, taking her hands in his. "You have yourself, and that is everything I want. I do not care about dowries or status. I care about you, about building a life together, about facing whatever comes next side by side." She looked up at him, seeing her own feelings reflected in his eyes. "Are you certain? I come with nothing but a past full of loss and debt. We all have scars from the past few years. What matters is what we build going forward." He reached up to cup her face, his thumb brushing her cheek. "Stay, Josephine. Not as a guest or an obligation, but as my partner. Marry me and help me build something worth having here." Tears spilled down her cheeks, but these were tears of joy. "Yes, yes, Benjamin, I will marry you." He pulled her into his arms, holding her close. She rested her head against his chest, listening to the steady thump of his heart. For the first time since her father died, she felt truly home, not because of the cabin or the valley, but because of the man whose arms surrounded her, promising safety and love and a future worth fighting for. He tilted her face up, and their lips met in a kiss that was tender and passionate and full of promise. When they finally broke apart, both were breathing hard, eyes shining in the firelight. "I love you," he whispered against her forehead. "I love you too." They spent the rest of the evening making plans, talking about when to marry and how to expand the cabin to accommodate a family. The storm raged outside, but inside there was only warmth and hope and the beginning of something beautiful. The next morning dawned clear and cold, the world transformed into a glittering winter wonderland. Benjamin woke to find Josephine already up, standing at the window watching the sunrise paint the snow pink and gold. He wrapped his arms around her from behind, resting his chin on her head. "Beautiful, is it not?" she murmured. "Stunning, almost as beautiful as you." She laughed and elbowed him gently. "Flatterer? Truth-teller." He turned her in his arms. "So, how soon can we make this official? Are you that eager to be stuck with me permanently? Absolutely. I want the whole world to know you are mine, and I am yours. They decided to wait until after the winter storms passed to have a proper ceremony. Daniel was thrilled when they shared the news, insisting on throwing them a celebration dinner. He produced a bottle of whiskey he had been saving for a special occasion, and they toasted to new beginnings late into the night. The following weeks were some of the happiest of Josephine's life. She and Benjamin worked side by side, planning their future and strengthening their bond. He taught her to ride better, taking her out on Daisy to explore the valley. She showed him how to make his grandmother's biscuit recipe, and they laughed together when the first batch burned because they got distracted kissing. In late February, Benjamin made a trip to town for supplies. He returned with fabric for a new dress, insisting Josephine needed something special to wear for their wedding. She protested the expense, but he silenced her with a kiss, telling her he wanted to spoil her, to make up for all the hardship she had endured. Besides, he said with a grin, if I am going to have the most beautiful bride in California, I need to ensure she has a dress worthy of the occasion. She smacked his arm playfully, but accepted the fabric, touched by his thoughtfulness. Over the next few weeks, she spent her evenings sewing by lamplight, creating a dress of deep blue wool that brought out the color of her eyes. It was simple but elegant, with careful stitching and small details that made it special. March arrived with the first hints of spring. The snow began to melt, revealing green grass beneath. Wildflowers started pushing through the earth, and the cattle grew more active as longer days returned. Benjamin and Daniel worked dawn to dusk, repairing winter damage and preparing for spring calving. They set the wedding date for the last Saturday in March, planning a small ceremony at the ranch. Benjamin invited a few neighboring ranchers and their families, while Daniel volunteered to ride to town to fetch the circuit preacher who passed through monthly. Josephine threw herself into preparations, cleaning the cabin until it shone and planning a feast for their guests. She baked bread and pies, prepared roasts and vegetables, determined to show Benjamin's friends and neighbors that she was worthy of being his wife. The night before the wedding, as she finished the last of the cooking, Benjamin found her in the kitchen. He wrapped his arms around her waist, pulling her back against his chest. "You are working too hard," he murmured into her hair. "Everyone is coming to celebrate us, not to judge your cooking. I know, but I want everything to be perfect. This is our beginning, and I want it to be special." He turned her around, his expression serious. "It will be perfect because you will be there, becoming my wife. Nothing else matters." She kissed him softly. "I cannot believe this is real sometimes, that I went from that auction block to here, to you. It feels like a dream. If it is a dream, then we are both having it, and I never want to wake up." He rested his forehead against hers. "Tomorrow, you become Josephine Vaughn. I have been looking forward to that since the day you agreed to marry me." "Josephine Vaughn," she repeated, testing the name. "I like the sound of that." They stood together in the quiet kitchen, holding each other as the lamp burned low. Tomorrow would bring ceremony and celebration, but tonight was just for them, a moment of peace before their lives changed forever. The wedding day dawned bright and clear, with a sky so blue it almost hurt to look at it. Josephine woke early, her stomach full of butterflies. She bathed and dressed carefully, taking extra time with her hair, pinning it up in a style her mother had favored. The blue dress fit perfectly, hugging her curves and falling in graceful lines to the floor. When she descended the stairs, she found Benjamin waiting at the bottom, dressed in his best clothes. His eyes widened when he saw her, and for a moment he could only stare. "You are breathtaking," he finally managed. She smiled, feeling beautiful under his gaze. "You clean up rather well yourself." Guests began arriving around noon. Neighboring ranchers and their families came bearing gifts and well wishes. The circuit preacher, a kindly older man named Reverend Matthews, arrived with Daniel just as the sun reached its apex. They all gathered outside, forming a loose circle near the cabin. Benjamin took Josephine's hand, leading her to stand before the Reverend. The ceremony was simple but meaningful. They spoke traditional vows, promising to love and cherish each other through whatever life brought. When Benjamin slipped a simple gold band on her finger, Josephine's eyes filled with tears. "I now pronounce you husband and wife," Reverend Matthews declared. "You may kiss your bride." Benjamin pulled Josephine into his arms and kissed her thoroughly, earning cheers and applause from their guests. When they broke apart, both were grinning like fools, unable to contain their joy. The The celebration that followed was lively and warm. They feasted on the food Josephine had prepared, and someone produced a fiddle, filling the air with music. Couples danced in the clearing, their laughter ringing out across the valley. Josephine found herself passed from partner to partner, everyone wanting to welcome the new Mrs. Vaughn properly. But her favorite dance was with her husband. Benjamin held her close as they swayed to a slow tune, his eyes never leaving her face. "Happy?" he asked softly. "Happier than I ever thought possible. Thank you for seeing me on that auction block, for not walking away, for giving me not just freedom, but a life worth living. Thank you for taking a chance on a rough rancher with more dreams than sense, for choosing to build something with me instead of running to civilization where you belong. I belong here, with you. This is where I am meant to be." They kissed again, oblivious to their audience, lost in each other and the perfect moment. As evening approached, the guests began departing, offering final congratulations and invitations to visit. Soon only Daniel remained, helping to clean up the remnants of the celebration. "I will sleep in the barn tonight," he announced with a knowing grin. "Give you two some privacy." Josephine blushed, but Benjamin just clapped his friend on the shoulder. "Appreciate it. And Daniel, thank you for everything, for being here, for supporting us. It means more than you know. You are like a brother to me, Ben. Your happiness is mine." He tipped his hat to Josephine. "Take care of him, Mrs. Vaughn. He is a good man, but he can be stubborn as a mule sometimes." "I noticed," she said with a laugh, "but I can handle him." After Daniel left, Benjamin and Josephine stood together in the doorway, watching the sun set over their valley. The sky blazed with orange and pink and purple, a spectacular show that seemed designed just for them. "Ready to start our life together, Mrs. Vaughn?" Benjamin asked. She turned to him, her heart so full she thought it might burst. "More than ready." He swept her into his arms, carrying her over the threshold as she laughed and protested. Inside, he set her gently on her feet, then cupped her face in his hands. "I love you, Josephine, today, tomorrow, and every day after that. You have my heart, my home, and my future. All of it is yours. And you have mine. I will spend the rest of my life making sure you never regret the day you bought my freedom and gave me my life back." "Impossible! That day brought me you. I could never regret that." They came together in a kiss that quickly deepened, passion and love and promise mingling together. Benjamin led her up the stairs to the loft, which he had transformed while she prepared for the wedding. Candles flickered on every surface, casting dancing shadows on the walls. He had brought up wildflowers in a vase, their sweet scent filling the air. "When did you do all this?" Josephine asked, touched by the romantic gesture. "This morning, while you were getting ready. I wanted our wedding night to be special." She turned to him, reaching up to run her fingers through his hair. "It would be special in a barn or a field or anywhere else, as long as I was with you." "Even so," he said, pulling her close again. "You deserve to be cherished, to be loved the way you should have been all along." What followed was tender and passionate. Two people joining together, not just physically, but emotionally, creating something new and sacred between them. They learned each other, gave themselves to each other. And when they finally fell asleep tangled together in the candlelight, both knew they had found something rare and precious. The months that followed were filled with hard work and deep contentment. Spring turned to summer, and the ranch thrived under their combined efforts. Josephine proved to be a natural with the animals, often joining Benjamin and Daniel in the fields. She learned to rope and brand, to spot a sick calf, to read weather signs in the sky. Benjamin expanded the cabin as promised, adding 2 rooms that would eventually serve as children's bedrooms. They talked often about their future family, both eager to fill their home with children who would grow up surrounded by love and possibility. In June, Josephine realized she was pregnant. She waited until she was certain before telling Benjamin, wanting to surprise him properly. One evening after supper, she took his hand and placed it on her still flat stomach. "There is someone else living here now," she said softly. "Someone who will join us around February if my calculations are right." Benjamin's eyes went wide as understanding dawned. "A baby? We are having a baby?" She nodded, grinning at his stunned expression. "Are you happy?" Instead of answering, he let out a whoop of joy and lifted her off her feet, spinning her around before remembering her condition and setting her down carefully. "Happy? I am over the moon. We are going to be parents." Daniel congratulated them enthusiastically when they shared the news, immediately declaring himself the baby's honorary uncle. He started carving a cradle in his spare time, determined to have it ready before the birth. As Josephine's belly grew through the summer and fall, Benjamin became increasingly protective. He insisted she rest more, take on lighter chores, and generally fussed over her in ways that were alternately endearing and exasperating. But she loved him for it, loved seeing how seriously he took his impending fatherhood. They spent long evenings planning for their child, debating names and arguing good-naturedly about whether they would be strict or lenient parents. Josephine made tiny clothes while Benjamin built furniture, both of them preparing for the life that was about to join theirs. Winter returned, bringing memories of the previous year and how much had changed. As Josephine stood at the window one snowy afternoon, her hand resting on her swollen belly, she reflected on the journey that had brought her here. A year ago, she stood on an auction block, certain her life was over. Now she had a husband who adored her, a child on the way, and a home filled with love. Benjamin came up behind her, wrapping his arms carefully around her and the baby. "What are you thinking about? How different this winter is from the last one. How grateful I am for everything that has happened. Even the hard parts, especially those, they brought me here, to this moment, to you." She turned in his embrace. "I would not change a single thing. Neither would I. Though I wish I could have saved you from that auction block altogether, kept you from ever having to endure that fear. But then we might never have met. Besides, it made me appreciate what we have all the more. I never take this for granted, Benjamin. Not for a single day." He kissed her forehead. "Good. Because I plan on spending the rest of my life making sure you stay happy." In early February, just as predicted, Josephine went into labor. Benjamin paced frantically outside, while Daniel fetched the doctor from town and the rancher's wife from the neighboring spread, a woman experienced in midwifery. The labor was long and difficult, testing Josephine's strength to its limits. But when Benjamin finally heard a baby's cry pierce the winter air, his heart nearly stopped. The doctor emerged, grinning broadly. "You have a son, Benjamin, a strong, healthy boy, and your wife is tired but doing well." Benjamin rushed inside to find Josephine propped up in bed, looking exhausted but radiant as she held a tiny bundle wrapped in blankets. He approached slowly, almost afraid this miracle would disappear. "Meet your son," Josephine said softly, holding the baby up for him to see. Benjamin took his son in trembling hands, staring down at the tiny red face and dark fuzz of hair. The baby's eyes opened, revealing a startling blue-gray, and Benjamin fell completely in love. "He is perfect," he whispered. "You are both perfect." They named him Thomas Daniel Vaughn, honoring Benjamin's father and their dear friend. Tommy proved to be a content baby, sleeping through the nights early and watching the world with curious eyes during the day. Benjamin was a devoted father, often found rocking his son and singing soft lullabies that made Josephine's heart melt. As spring returned once again, the Vaughn family settled into new rhythms. Josephine managed the household while caring for Tommy, somehow juggling 1,000 tasks with grace and humor. Benjamin continued expanding the ranch, hiring additional help as the cattle business grew. Daniel remained a constant presence, spoiling his honorary nephew shamelessly. Years passed in a blur of happiness and hard work. Tommy grew into a bright, energetic boy who followed his father everywhere, learning ranch work almost before he could walk. 2 more children followed, a daughter named Sarah after Benjamin's lost sister, and another son they called James after Josephine's maiden name. The cabin expanded again to accommodate their growing family. Benjamin's dream of a legacy came true as he watched his children run through the valley he had claimed, their laughter echoing off the hills. The ranch prospered, becoming one of the most successful operations in the region. Josephine found fulfillment in ways she never expected. Being a mother suited her, and she threw herself into raising their children with the same determination she brought to everything else. But she also remained Benjamin's partner in every sense, helping manage the business side of the ranch and riding out with him when she could, leaving the children with Daniel, who had become as much family as friend. The neighboring ranchers and townspeople came to respect Josephine Vaughn as a woman of strength and intelligence. No one remembered or cared that she had once stood on an auction block. She was simply Benjamin's wife, the mother of his children, and a valued member of the community. One evening, as they celebrated their 10th anniversary, Benjamin and Josephine stood on the porch watching the sunset. Their children played in the yard under Daniel's watchful eye, their shouts and laughter filling the air. The ranch stretched out before them, prosperous and beautiful, everything they had dreamed of building together. "Do you ever think about that day in Weaverville?" Benjamin asked, slipping his arm around her waist. "Sometimes. Usually when I want to remind myself how blessed I am." "I am the blessed one. You could have taken that horse and ridden away, started fresh somewhere without the baggage of what I did. But you stayed, you chose me. You built this life with me." Josephine leaned into him, perfectly content. "It was never really a choice. My heart knew where it belonged from the first moment you wrapped your coat around my shoulders. Everything after that was just details." "Lucky details. I love you, Josephine, more now than I did 10 years ago, which I would not have believed possible. I love you too. Thank you for seeing me that day, for being brave enough to help a stranger, for giving me not just freedom, but a reason to use it." They kissed as the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in brilliant colors. Behind them, their children's laughter rang out, and Daniel called them in for dinner. This was home, this was family, this was the life they had built from the ashes of tragedy, and the courage of one cowboy who refused to walk past injustice. Tommy, now 10 years old, came running up the porch steps. "Mama, Papa, Uncle Daniel says we can ride out to the north pasture tomorrow and check the new calves. Can we go?" Benjamin ruffled his son's hair. "We can, but early start, which means early bedtime tonight." "Yes, sir?" Tommy dashed back to his siblings to share the news. "He is so much like you," Josephine observed. "Stubborn, brave, and kind. He is going to be a good man. He has a good mother teaching him how to treat people with respect and dignity. You are shaping who he will become just as much as I am. We are doing it together. Everything is better when we do it together." Benjamin pulled her close, grateful beyond words for the life they shared. He thought about the $500 he had spent that winter day, money that had seemed like a fortune at the time. Now he knew it was the best investment he ever made, not because he bought anything, but because it opened the door to everything that mattered. Inside, they gathered around the table with their children and Daniel, sharing a meal and stories from their day. This was what Benjamin had dreamed of during long, cold nights during the war, a home filled with warmth and love, children who knew security and joy, a wife who was his equal partner in all things. Later, after the children were tucked into bed and Daniel had retired to his cabin, Benjamin and Josephine sat before the fire. She leaned against him, his arm around her shoulders, both of them savoring the quiet. "What are you thinking?" she asked, noticing his distant expression. "About how different my life would be if I had not gone to town that day, if I had chosen to stay home, or arrived an hour later, or any of a dozen other small changes that would have meant missing you." "Fate," Josephine said softly. "I like to think we were always meant to find each other, that all the pain and loss we both endured was leading us to that moment in the square. Maybe you are right. It certainly feels destined, how perfectly we fit together." She turned to look at him, love shining in her eyes. "Do you know what I am most grateful for? Not just that you saved me, but that you gave me a choice. You could have kept me bound by that contract, could have used your power over me. But instead, you set me free and trusted me to choose what came next. That gift of choice, of agency when I had none, that is what made everything possible." Benjamin kissed her temple. "You deserve to be free. Everyone does. I just happened to be in a position to help. You did more than help. You changed my entire life. You showed me what real love looks like, what partnership means. You gave me a family and a home and a future I never dared hope for. And you gave me purpose. I was just existing before you, going through the motions of building something without really understanding why. You made me want to be better, to create something meaningful. This ranch, our family, it is all because you inspired me to reach for more." They sat in comfortable silence, the fire crackling and the clock ticking on the mantel. Outside, an owl hooted, and the wind whispered through the pines. This valley had become their sanctuary, this cabin their castle, and the love they shared the foundation on which everything else was built. As the years continued to pass, the Vaughn Ranch became a landmark in the region. Benjamin's breeding program produced horses known throughout California for their strength and intelligence. The cattle operation expanded to include partnerships with other ranchers, creating a network that benefited the entire community. Josephine became known for her charitable work, never forgetting the desperation of her own situation years before. She helped other women in difficult circumstances, offering jobs at the ranch or connecting them with opportunities in town. She worked to change laws around debt contracts, lobbying politicians, and rallying community support until reforms were passed. Her efforts earned her respect and admiration, but she always deflected praise. "I am just doing what anyone should do," she would say, "helping people who need it the way I was helped." Tommy grew into a fine young man, taking on more responsibility at the ranch. Sarah proved to have her mother's quick mind and her father's determination, while James combined the best traits of both parents. The children were happy and confident, raised in an environment of love and security. Daniel eventually married a widow from town, a kind woman named Margaret who fit seamlessly into their extended family. He built a larger cabin for his new wife, and soon their children were playing alongside the Vaughn children, the ranch becoming home to two families bound by loyalty and love. On their 20th anniversary, Benjamin surprised Josephine with a gift. He led her outside to find a beautiful mare, dark and sleek, with intelligent eyes and perfect conformation. "She is yours," he said. "I have been developing this line for years, and she represents the pinnacle of everything I have learned. But more than that, she is a reminder of a promise I made 2 decades ago." Josephine stared at him, confused. "What promise?" "I told you I would give you a horse so you could ride away. I gave you Daisy, and you chose to stay. But I always meant to give you a horse worthy of you, a mount that matched your strength and spirit. This is that horse." Tears filled her eyes as she understood. "You remembered." "I remember everything about that day. Every detail is burned into my memory, because it was the day my life truly began." He handed her the reins. "So, here is your horse, Josephine. You can still ride away if you want, though I hope you will choose to stay." She laughed through her tears, throwing her arms around him. "You foolish, wonderful man. I would never leave. This is my home, you are my heart, and I am exactly where I belong." "That is what I hoped you would say." She named the mare Freedom, a tribute to the gift Benjamin had given her all those years ago. She rode Freedom often, exploring the valley and the surrounding hills, always returning home to the man and the life she loved. As they grew older, Benjamin and Josephine watched their children mature and start families of their own. Tommy took over more of the ranch operations, proving himself a capable manager. Sarah married a doctor from San Francisco, but returned often, unable to stay away from the valley for long. James decided to study law, inspired by his mother's advocacy work, planning to continue her efforts to protect vulnerable people. Grandchildren arrived, filling the expanded cabin with noise and chaos and unbridled joy. Benjamin built a swing on the porch, and Josephine spent countless hours rocking babies and telling stories to wide-eyed toddlers. They reveled in this new phase of life, enjoying the rewards of what they had built. Daniel and Margaret's children grew up alongside the Vaughn grandchildren. The two families so intertwined, it was sometimes hard to tell where one ended and the other began. Holiday celebrations became massive affairs, with multiple generations gathering to share food and laughter and love. On a warm summer evening, as they approached their 30th anniversary, Benjamin and Josephine rode out together on a pair of horses. They traveled to a high meadow overlooking the valley, a spot they had discovered years ago and claimed as their special place. The sun was setting, painting the world in gold and amber. They dismounted and stood at the edge, looking down at the ranch sprawling below. Lights twinkled from the main cabin and Daniel's house, smoke rising from chimneys, despite the summer warmth, as stoves were fired up for dinner. "Look at what we built," Benjamin said softly. "When I bought your contract, I never imagined all this." "What did you imagine?" "Honestly, I just wanted to save you, to give you a chance at something better. I did not let myself think beyond that moment. But this, all of this, exceeded my wildest dreams." Josephine took his hand, lacing their fingers together. "Do you remember what you said to me that first day at the ranch? You told me I was free, that what happened next was up to me. I remember. The freedom you gave me was not just about tearing up a contract or handing me supplies to start over. It was the freedom to choose love, to choose partnership, to choose to build something meaningful. You taught me that freedom is not just about being unbound, but about having the agency to create the life you want. Benjamin pulled her close, resting his chin on her head. We created it together. Every choice, every challenge, every triumph, we faced it all as partners. And I would do it all again in a heartbeat, every hard moment, every struggle, because it led to this, to us, to our family, to a life so full of love, I sometimes cannot believe it is real. It is real. We made it real through determination and commitment and love that refused to quit even when things got difficult. They stood watching as stars began appearing in the darkening sky, the first hints of night creeping across the valley. Behind them, the horses grazed peacefully, and somewhere in the distance, a coyote howled. "Thank you," Josephine whispered, "for seeing me that day in the square, for not walking away, for believing I was worth saving. You gave me everything." "No," Benjamin corrected gently. "We gave each other everything. The moment you chose to stay, you saved me just as much as I saved you. You made my life complete." They returned home as the moon rose, riding side by side through familiar terrain. The cabin glowed with lamplight, and they could hear voices inside. Their children and grandchildren gathered for dinner. This was legacy. This was purpose. This was what it all meant. As the years turned into decades, Benjamin and Josephine aged gracefully together. Their hair turned silver, their movements slowed, but the love between them never diminished. They remained each other's best friend, trusted confidant, and passionate partner through all the changes life brought. On their 50th anniversary, the family threw them a massive celebration. People came from across the state to honor the couple who had built not just a successful ranch, but a legacy of kindness and integrity. Speeches were made, toasts were raised, and stories were told late into the night. But the best moment came later, when Benjamin and Josephine were finally alone. They sat on the porch in the same rocking chairs they had occupied for 30 years, holding hands and watching the stars. 50 years, Josephine marveled. Can you believe it has been 50 years since that winter day? 50 years, 3 children, 8 grandchildren, and more blessings than I can count. Not bad for a chance encounter in a town square. It was never chance. It was always meant to be. Benjamin lifted her hand to his lips, kissing it gently. "I would marry you all over again tomorrow if I could. You are still the most beautiful woman I have ever seen, the bravest person I know, and the love of my life." "You silver-tongued devil," she said with a laugh, "still trying to sweep me off my feet after all these years. Always, until my last breath, I will work to make you happy. You already have. Every single day you have made me happy. What more could I possibly ask for?" They rocked in comfortable silence, the night wrapping around them like a blanket. Eventually, they made their way inside to bed, climbing the stairs to the loft they had shared since their wedding night. Even now, they fell asleep wrapped in each other's arms, finding comfort and security in the familiar warmth of their partner. More years passed, bringing both joy and sorrow. Daniel passed away peacefully in his sleep, surrounded by family. His loss left a hole in their lives, but they honored his memory by continuing to treat his children and grandchildren as their own. Margaret followed him a few years later, and the two were buried side by side overlooking the valley they had loved. Tommy took full control of the ranch, proving himself even more successful than his father. He expanded operations further, while maintaining the values Benjamin and Josephine had instilled. The Vaughn name became synonymous with quality and integrity throughout California. As they entered their 70s, Benjamin's health began to decline. Nothing dramatic, just the slow accumulation of years spent working hard in all weather. Josephine nursed him tenderly, never complaining about the extra care he required. He tried to apologize for being a burden, but she would hear none of it. "You cared for me when I had nothing," she reminded him. "Now I care for you. That is what love means, Benjamin. We carry each other through the hard times." One spring evening, as apple blossoms drifted on the breeze and the valley erupted in color, Benjamin called his family together. They gathered in the main room, grown children and teenage grandchildren filling every available space. Josephine sat beside him, her hand firmly clasped in his. "I wanted you all here," Benjamin said, his voice weaker than it once was, but still strong with conviction. "To tell you how proud I am of each of you. You have grown into good people, kind and strong and capable. You are the legacy your mother and I dreamed of building." Tommy stepped forward, his own hair graying now. Papa, you and Mama built something incredible here. Not just the ranch, but a family rooted in love and respect. We are who we are because of your example. Your father is right, Josephine added. This ranch, this land, it is all just backdrop. What truly matters is the love we share, the way we support each other, the values we pass down. That is the real legacy. They spent hours talking, sharing memories and laughter and tears. The grandchildren asked questions about the past, hungry for stories of how it all began. Benjamin and Josephine took turns recounting their journey from that first meeting in winter to the life they had built together. As night fell and the family reluctantly departed to their own homes, Benjamin pulled Josephine close. They sat before the fire, wrapped in quilts, savoring the quiet. "I am tired," Benjamin admitted softly. "So tired, Josephine, but I cannot rest yet, not while you need me." "I will always need you," she whispered, tears sliding down her weathered cheeks. "But I also want you to be at peace, not suffering. If you need to go, I understand. Not yet, I am not ready to leave you yet." But both knew the time was coming. They made the most of every day, treasuring each moment together. Benjamin grew weaker through the summer, spending more time resting, but still insisting on sitting outside to watch the sunset with his wife. On a warm evening in late August, surrounded by family, Benjamin Vaughn passed peacefully from this life to whatever lay beyond. Josephine held his hand as he took his last breath, whispering words of love and gratitude. Though her heart shattered, she took comfort in knowing he was no longer in pain. They buried him on a hill overlooking the valley, with a simple headstone that read, "Benjamin Vaughn, beloved husband, father, and friend. He saw injustice and chose kindness." Josephine visited his grave every day, talking to him about their family, the ranch, the weather. She found solace in these one-sided conversations, feeling his presence in the wind and the bird songs. The family worried about her, but she assured them she was fine. "I am just waiting," she told Tommy when he expressed concern. "Your father and I were never meant to be apart for long." She lived 2 more years, remaining active and engaged with her family, but clearly holding part of herself in reserve. She played with great-grandchildren, advised on ranch decisions, and continued her charitable work. But everyone could see she was ready to move on, to join the man who had been her other half for over 50 years. On a crisp winter morning, almost exactly 53 years after Benjamin bought her freedom, Josephine James Vaughn passed away in her sleep. She was found in the same loft bedroom she had shared with Benjamin, a peaceful smile on her face, as if she had seen something wonderful just before leaving. The family buried her beside Benjamin on the hill, their headstones identical except for her inscription, "Josephine Vaughn, beloved wife, mother, and friend. She chose love and built a legacy." The funeral drew hundreds of people, testifying to the impact Josephine had made throughout her long life. But the most touching tribute came from her great-granddaughter, who read a letter Josephine had written years before, to be shared after her death. "If you are reading this, then I have gone to join my Benjamin," the letter began. "Do not mourn for us too long. We lived a beautiful life, full of love and purpose and joy. We started with nothing but each other, and we built an empire of kindness. That is the legacy I want to leave, not the land or the cattle or the money, but the knowledge that choosing love and compassion can transform the world. Benjamin saw me on my darkest day and chose to help, expecting nothing in return. That act of grace changed both our lives and created ripples that touched hundreds of people. Be that kind of person. See the suffering around you and choose to act. Give freely, love deeply, and never walk past injustice. That is how you honor our memory. That is how you keep our love alive in the world." As the words faded, there was not a dry eye present. The family embraced, drawing strength from each other and the legacy they had inherited. The ranch continued to thrive under Tommy's guidance and eventually his children's, but it was always more than a business. It was a testament to what 2 people could build when they chose love over fear, partnership over power, and hope over despair. Years turned into generations, but the story of Benjamin and Josephine Vaughn never faded. It became part of the family mythology, told to each new child as they grew old enough to understand. The hill where they were buried became sacred ground, a place to visit when facing difficult decisions or needing inspiration. The town of Weaverville eventually erected a historical marker in the square where the auction had taken place. It did not mention specific names, but commemorated the injustices that had occurred there and celebrated those who had stood against them. Some said it was inspired by the story of a cowboy who paid an exorbitant sum to free a woman in winter, then gave her the choice to build her own future. The Vaughn Ranch still operated over a century later, now one of the most respected family enterprises in California history. But those who ran it never forgot the foundation on which it was built, an act of compassion on a cold winter day, and two people who chose to turn that moment into something eternal. In the end, their story was not about the hardships they overcame or the wealth they accumulated. It was about the transformative power of choosing love, about seeing another person's humanity and acting to preserve it, about building something beautiful from the ashes of tragedy. It was about a woman sold like property who refused to surrender her dignity, and a man who recognized that dignity and honored it. It was about freedom, not just the legal kind, but the deeper freedom that comes from being seen, valued, and loved for exactly who you are. The freedom to choose your own path, to take risks on love, to build a life that honors both your past struggles and your future dreams. Benjamin bought Josephine's contract, yes, but what he really gave her was the chance to choose, and what she chose was to stay, to love, to build. Together they created something that lasted far beyond their mortal years, a legacy of kindness, a family rooted in compassion, and a love story that proved even the darkest moments can transform into something luminous and lasting. Their story ended, as all stories must, with death and grief and the passage of time. But it also ended with triumph, with a life well lived and love well expressed, with children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren who carried forward the values they had modeled. It ended with two graves side by side on a hill, overlooking a valley they had claimed and shaped and filled with life. And if you visited that hill on a quiet evening, some said you could almost hear their voices on the wind, laughing together as they watched over the legacy they had built from a single act of courage on a winter day in Weaverville, when a cowboy looked at injustice and chose to intervene, and a woman faced with impossible odds chose to hope, and together they proved that love can indeed conquer all.